Johnny Two-Face here, back with another reaction video. This time I'm reacting to First Battle of Tarain 1191 AD, First Islamic Conquest of India by History March. Now this 4-episode series by History March I've been planning to react on for quite some time, but I've been distracted like other requests and that, and I've just, for some dumb reason, I just pushed it onto the back burner. So and this is from their playlist titled History of India, and I thought, since I've reacted to what's it called, Early Muslim Expansion documentary series by Kings and Generals, and Epic History TV's 2-part series about the rise and fall of the Abbasid Caliphate, I thought, why not do a bit more more Asian history, Indian history, before the British Empire, and or any Europeans were anywhere near the subcontinent. So so again, thought it'd be a decent change to some earlier Indian history, again before the British Empire. So again, this is a 4-episode series. So anyway, the usual disclaimer when I react to anything historical: if I don't show so much what is considered a proper reaction, it is probably obvious I don't know much about the subject at hand, and if I do know anything, I'll most likely pause the video to give my input or ask any curious questions, which hopefully will be answered in the comments. With that being said, the link to the original video will be in the description down below. Please go and subscribe to History March, another great history channel here on YouTube, and not much more I can add to this at the moment, so I'll just get up on screen, full screen. That would help. Captions on, and see what happens in this. Oh, and also check out Hoc Est Bellum as well. Let's turn this up a bit.
The Battle of the Talas River was a decisive moment for the history of Central Asia, even though its effects were not immediately apparent. Abbasid victory not only stopped China's westward expansion, but also determined the religious path of a region that is at the crossroads of Asia. The ensuing centuries saw the gradual conversion of local populations to Islam, among which were the warlike Turkish tribes.
But it also, in the Early Muslim Expansion series, it talks about the three main caliphates: Rashidun, Umayyad, and the Abbasids, which carved out an empire which pretty much spanned almost all the Middle East, basically obliterated the Sassanid Persian Empire, and severely damaged what was left of the Eastern Roman or Byzantine Empire. That it was just barely, the Byzantines barely had an empire at that stage. And all across North Africa, conquered Spain, what is now modern day Spain and Portugal, until they were stopped at Tours by the Franks. So but if you want more detail, go and watch that series by Kings and Generals, about the early Muslim expansion. Or if you want to, check out my reaction to that series as well, which obviously is on my channel.
Nomadic warriors that were especially gifted horse archers. Their mastery of horsemanship hadn't gone unnoticed by the Muslim caliphates, who
obviously horse archers in this type of environment were especially sought after, even though the Turkish tribes weren't the only horse archers in the world, because you got to think about like well, not so much the Huns, but the Mongols and the Parthians, which funny enough, if I remember rightly, was nicknamed after, which is a famous there's a famous horse archer technique called the Parthian shot, which basically means as you're riding forward, you can pretty much shoot straight behind you, like turning your upper body and almost doing a 180, and shooting behind you while doing their hit and run tactics. So, sorry, my TV just turned on by itself. Got distracted. Ooh, scary. Anyway, let's get back into this.
Recruited them to serve as an elite arm of their own armies.
Don't know why that was a bit loud.
However, in the wake of the breakup of the Abbasid Caliphate into smaller states and sultanates, these elite Turkish warriors emerged as the power brokers in the region. One of the first breakaway sultanates was founded by Mahmud of Ghazni. Today's video is sponsored by World of Tanks, a large-scale tank-based adventurous multiplayer online game. Tanks.
Feel free to check them out if you're interested. Mahmud of Ghazni.
Under the leadership of Mahmud of Ghazni, the Ghaznavids became a significant power, and he was among the first to adopt the title of Sultan. Mahmud was able to inflict a series of military defeats to the Hindu Shahis, and for the first time penetrate into the heartland of India. He launched 16 large-scale raids targeting the wealthy religious centers, with the ultimate goal of amassing fame and wealth within the Islamic world. However, he did not try to retain a permanent foothold in the area, and the locals were able to recover from Ghaznavid raids. But with the death of Mahmud began a gradual decline, and by mid-12th century, one of his former vassals, the Ghurids, a dynasty of Tajik origin, gradually asserted their authority in the Ghor region, methodically expanding their power base until they eventually sacked the city of Ghazni in 1149, thereby emerging as an independent power. What followed was a period of expansion that would lead to the formation of the Ghurid Empire, under the leadership of two brothers, Gayeth al-Din and Muiz al-Din, also known as the Muhammad of Ghor. During the 1170s and 1180s, they embarked on a series of successful campaigns against the neighboring Seljuks and other pretenders to the Ghurid throne. Gayeth al-Din concentrated on the western domains of the empire, while Muhammad, after helping his brother to secure the west, looked southwards to India. But unlike the Ghaznavids that came before, Muhammad aimed at carving out an empire in India, and the nearby Rajput kingdoms appeared ripe for the taking. In India, this was the time of the Raj...
Sorry, I'll just read this. Oops. Ugh. The term Rajput was probably didn't exist during Prithviraj's time, and it is an acronym used by popular sources for the period. And I apologize if I butchered that name.
Rajput kingdoms. Rajputs were a loose grouping of patrilineal clans found in the Indian subcontinent. After the dissolution of the Pratihara Empire, their former feudatories established decentralized power bases all over central and western India. Many kingdoms sprang into existence, all culturally and ethnically indistinct.
Oh, if anyone's got any recommendations of early Indian history, feel free to put that in the comments.
Distinguishable from one another, yet mutually antagonistic. Between 1000 and 1200 AD, the Rajput kingdoms had to face constant incursions and invasions from Turkish tribes. During the times of Muhammad of Ghor, northern India was divided into three main power centers: the Solanki Chalukyas of Gujarat, the Gadavalas under Jai Chandra at Kannauj, and the Prithviraj Chauhan of Ajmer and Delhi. The most prominent of these kingdoms was that of Prithviraj Chauhan.
Oh, Prithviraj. I was about to say, no wonder why I butchered it, because there was no T, like, in the description that you see me try to read out earlier. So, Prithviraj.
By 1178, Muhammad was intent on attacking India, and his main invasion route led directly through Prithviraj's domain. His first intended target was the Chalukya Solanki kingdom. Subsequently, he sent an envoy to the court of Prithviraj, attempting to persuade the Indian king to come to a peaceful agreement. According to the terms presented by the envoy, Muhammad would agree to provide...
Hang on. Let me go back, because for some reason, every now and again when I press the center of the screen to pause the video, it keeps going out of full screen. Oh, hang on.
Raj, attempting to persuade the Indian king to come to a peace...
Right. Excuse me while I read this. In a vivid description of this event, an Indian source informs us that an envoy was extremely ugly, and that his ghastly white complexion made him appear suffering from a skin disease, while his speech was like the crying of wild birds. Wow, okay. Oop, put the captions back on.
Full agreement. According to the terms presented by the envoy, Muhammad would agree to provide passage and divide the Solanki kingdom with Prithviraj. In addition, he demanded that Prithviraj convert to Islam and accept Ghurid suzerainty. Prithviraj rejected, but failed to send reinforcements to the neighboring kingdom that was about to be attacked. Undeterred, the Ghurid ruler amassed a mobile army of Turkish horse warriors and marched on a circuitous route through the Thar Desert and into the outskirts of Chalukya territory. After many days of marching through inhospitable and hostile territory, he was eventually confronted by a large Chalukya army on a valley near Mount Abu. Muhammad's army, tired and dehydrated from the long march and unable to use the mobility of its cavalry within the narrow valley, was forced into a close quarters frontal battle against the Rajputs and was eventually routed. However, the fleeing Ghurid army was not decisively pursued by the Chalukyas and thus avoided
Hang on. The Indian war ethos of the period practiced a form of ritualistic warfare conduct on the battlefield. Was to be honourable, so enemies who submitted were not to be harmed, and those who retreated not to be chased. Okay.
Total destruction. Nevertheless, the invading army suffered heavy casualties during the battle and the subsequent retreat back across the desert. In spite of this setback, Muhammad was not a man to be disheartened by adversities, and during the following decade, he set out to rebuild his forces and expand his territories into Peshawar. He then advanced with his army and took Sialkot, and by 1187 he conquered Lahore, executing its ruler, thus ending the last remnants of the Ghaznavids. Now, his realm bordered Prithviraj's domain, and between 1187 and 1190, a series of minor and medium probing incursions were launched. The situation escalated rapidly, and in 1190, Muhammad concentrated a large force of horse warriors and advanced against the important border fortress of Bathinda. After a brief siege, he was able to capture the stronghold and placed a garrison there, under the command of one of his generals. News of Bathinda falling to the enemy soon reached Delhi. The shock of the loss of this significant stronghold galvanized Prithviraj into action. He called upon his feudatories, quickly amassing a large army, and marched out to meet the invaders. Upon learning of the king's approach, Muhammad set out with his mounted army to intercept him. The two armies met on the fields of Tarain, some 150 kilometers north of Delhi. While exaggerated contemporary accounts place the size of Prithvi Raj's army at around 200,000 troops, modern historians estimate that the Rajput army did not exceed 50,000 men.
Yeah, because there's when you read a lot of history books, the numbers do tend to be exaggerated. Because I think they're trying to think of, like, how many men could you realistically put in a battle this size? But again, newer sources and newer historical evidence slowly keeps coming out, so the best thing is just to wait and see what new evidence pops up.
The Rajputs of the period were ferocious warriors who excelled in close combat, which they generally favoured. Indian metallurgy and weapons were renowned for their quality and generally enjoyed a reputation as the best in the world, a fact that gave them a further edge in close quarters fighting. On the other side of the field, the size of Muhammad's army was similarly exaggerated, with original sources claiming that around 100,000 troops arrayed on the field, while the actual size of the Ghurid force was around 15,000 cavalry, which included camels, but their exact number is unknown. Although substantially outnumbered, Muhammad's mounted force was comprised of professional Mamluk slave troops, agile and fast-moving horse archers, who were superior to their feudal counterparts. The two armies represented...
Again, I'm no expert, but I think the composite bow was the only bow that can match, who could match the range and power of the English longbow. But if I'm wrong about that, please feel free to correct me in the comments.
Opposite ends of the military spectrum. On one side, a feudal force of slow...
But of course, for those who don't know, the composite bow was more practical for horse archers.
Moving, undisciplined but courageous warriors with little to no experience in dealing with complicated cavalry maneuvers. And on the other side, a swift and fast-moving mounted army of professional soldiers, almost exclusively composed of steppe cavalry that excelled in mobile warfare. The Ghurid army deployed in a standard Turkic battle formation, with an advanced guard, a strong centre and two wings. A relatively small reserve of elite Ghulam lancers was kept in the rear. Across the field, Prithvi Raj deployed his army in a linear formation, with two wings and a centre. The large force of elephants was deployed in front of the main line. The battle began with a probing attack ordered by Muhammad. The horse archers of the vanguard galloped towards the huge bulk of the Indian army and began peppering their formations with arrows. Prithvi Raj's response to this was immediate. He ordered an all-out frontal assault. This surprised the Ghurids, who weren't accustomed to the Rajput style of warfare. Muhammad's vanguard retreated toward their main line, but the Rajputs unexpectedly moved so rapidly that the Ghurids were unable to respond accordingly. Before Muhammad could maneuver and adapt to this general charge, his vanguard's retreat was blocked by the men behind them, and the Rajputs were quickly closing in. Incredibly, the Ghurid warriors held off the massive charge, their experience and professionalism paying dividends as they cut down wave after wave of enemy attacks. But with the Indian cavalry striking the Ghurid flanks, Muhammad's entire line was dislodged, and the Muslim commander could see that his army will be overwhelmed. The fierce melee slowly began to turn in favor of the Rajputs, who were able to display their prowess in close quarters, and the sheer weight of their numbers became a decisive factor as the Ghurid flanks were gradually driven back and cut off from their center. Unable to withstand the pressure of the Indian onslaught, Muhammad's troops on the flanks broke and fled. Meanwhile, the war elephants and cavalry of Prithviraj's centre that had driven back the Ghurid vanguard onto their front line kept the Turkish centre under sustained pressure. Here, too, the light horsemen were outside of their element, hemmed in by the immense pressure of the relentless Rajput advance, and unable to use their mobility, they began to waver. Muhammad now understood that the battle had reached its critical point. Seeing his flanks routing and his centre on the verge of collapse, he charged into the fray, attempting a personal last-ditch effort to reverse the course of battle. The Ghurid general soon came face to face with the commander of the Rajput centre, Govind Rai, who was mounted on an elephant, personally charging his front lines. As soon as Muhammad spotted him, he hurled his spear at him. Govind Rai was able to block the projectile with his shield, but the impact broke a few of his front teeth.
Ouch.
In turn, Govind threw his own spear, critically wounding Muhammad, almost knocking him unconscious.
Not to mention the height advantage that Rai had on his elephant, which means using the force of gravity, you could use the impact from the spear using gravity to multiply the impact.
Unable to defend himself, Muhammad of Ghor was saved by the heroic actions of one of his bodyguards, who was able to lift the Sultan onto his horse and spirit him away from the battlefield. The remaining leaderless Ghurid army, seeing their general carried off the battlefield, broke and routed. The Rajputs pursued the retreating army of Muhammad for almost 40 kilometers, but they couldn't match the pace of the fast-moving steppe mounts of their enemy. Muhammad underestimated the strength and ferocity of the Rajput frontal assault and their ability in close combat. Prithviraj's audacity and explosiveness caught the Ghurids off guard and forced them to an engagement that played into his own strengths. The Indian commander took the initiative early in the battle and retained it throughout the engagement, forcing his enemies to react to his actions and rendering them unable to employ their advantages in mobility and firepower. The ultimate salvation of the Ghurids was the fact that the Indian army was incapable of completely pinning them down and destroying them during their retreat. And although Muhammad of Ghor was now retreating, he would live to fight another day. Credit goes to our awesome patrons who...
Sorry, just read these last facts. The Ghurid campaign that led to the First Battle of Tarain lasted over 12 months, starting in 1190. Well, the battle probably took place in the winter of 1191.
Who make videos like this one possible. Consider joining them to support our work. You can also support us by subscribing to our channel and click...
The rout of the Turkic army was total, but their ponies outpaced the Rajputs, allowing the Ghurids to recover and rebuild their army over the coming months.
Clicking the bell button to get notified when our new videos are released. And as always, thank you for watching.
Prithviraj followed up his victory by laying siege to Bathinda, which would continue for more than a year. Okay. Just make sure there's nothing else. And that'll do it. This has been quite a good episode by History March. Again, refresh and change to learn about some earlier Indian history, like I said at the beginning. But anyway, that's by the by. So anyway, I hope this has been good to see for... God, I can't speak properly. So if you like this reaction, please like, comment and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.